The introductions had dragged long enough to make stars feel slow. Rian Cade, human envoy, combat veteran, polite on paper, kept his expression neutral as the Vasari conclave recited lineages and titles. From the far end of the obsidian table, a sleek figure rose on silent pads and walked toward him with the patient certainty of a predator. Purple fur caught the chandelier light in soft violet sheens. "Zephyr Knox," someone whispered, like a warning. She stopped at Rian's chair. Then she stepped in close. Her knee brushed his. Her weight folded down onto his lap as if he were part of the furniture. Conversation froze. Rian's augments flattened, his pulse curved to baseline. The tiny haptic under his collarbone buzzed. Biometric dampeners engaged. He kept his voice low, tuned so only Zephyr and the nearest elders would catch it. "Your pulse just spiked." For the smallest fraction of a second her smirk loosened. "You've accepted the Kareth claim, human," she murmured. "By not yielding, you invoked it." Elder Darren's voice carried from the dais. "Commander Knox has tested the envoy. The Kareth is in motion." Rian smiled without teeth. "Then you'd better explain it to me." Zephyr slid off him without apology and returned to her seat. No one spoke for the remainder of the meeting. When it adjourned, Vasari officers filed out in rigid columns. Human delegates found themselves politely herded toward the guest wing by escorts who were polite but visibly armed. Rian didn't make it to his quarters. "Env Cade," said a guard in matte gray armor. "You are summoned to the resonance court." "The seating arrangement?" Rian asked. "The Kareth." The smaller guard's whiskers flicked. "By law, the trial must begin before next sunrise." The court was a circular pit of basalt and blue light. In its center waited Zephyr Knox, 25 by the human calendar, every line of her built like a poem written by a knife. Elder Darren's voice boomed from above. "The trial is neurolinked. Pain, impact, adrenaline, all sensations shared. Yielding concedes the Kareth. Victory decides the thread." Rian tilted his head. "And if one of us yields? Then the Kareth binds the victor to the victor's will, for a time." Darren's ears twitched, amused. "Or binds you to each other, should the thread hold." A tech touched Rian's neck. The link clicked home with a hiss and a doorway of static. Zephyr stepped in. "When I strike you," she said, "you will feel it twice. Skin, then mind." "2 for 1, Rian said. "Sail day." The elder dropped a hand. Zephyr moved first, fast, testing his flank with a low cut meant to force a stumble. He slid, leaned backward, let her momentum flow past. The crowd hissed at each near miss. He mapped her rhythm, 3 beats steady, 4th beat faint, shoulder leads her hips, tail in the left ear. When his opening came, he took it. He caught her wrist mid-strike, felt the shock of contact ripple back into him through the link. Shared pain bit his forearm, brief and hot. He spun her off balance, knee pinning her thigh to the floor. Adrenaline surged, his and hers braided. "You're not entirely human," she said, breath sharp. "Says the woman with a microreactor for a spleen." For a heartbeat neither moved. Then she exploded, strength like a spring, and they split apart. Minutes later, they stood chest heaving, link humming. Elder Darren raised his hand. "Combatants matched," he declared. "The Kareth remains unresolved." Zephyr wiped a sheen of sweat with the back of her hand and left without a word. They did not return Rian to the human wing. 2 Vasari officers escorted him down beneath the private hall into the administrative labyrinth. A door irised open to reveal a compact living cell, bare, precise, adjustable. "This isn't a prison," Zephyr said from the doorway as the panel sealed behind her. "It's a compatibility suite." "Suite isn't doing a lot of work there," Rian said. "The Conclave wants to observe us while the Kareth remains open." She brushed a control. The ambient temperature fell. "You just dropped it by 10 degrees, she said, smiling with only one side of her mouth. "Vasari regulate heat efficiently." "You'll slow first." Rian walked to the wall panel, slid a cable into a seam, and pulsed a diagnostic override. On her half of the room, the temperature spiked. Now we're both miserable, he said. They circled each other for an hour, the smart cell chasing their physiology with light and climate shifts, either willing to blink first. Your reflexes, Zephyr said eventually. Not standard human. Augments, he said. Neural lag trimmed under 100 milliseconds. Still slower than a Vasari battle synapse. Unless the officer is distracted. Her eyes flicked up. You are stubborn, human. Takes one to know one. Lights dimmed to the edge of night. On opposite cots, staring past the ceiling's soft pulse, both listened to the thrum of a planet holding its breath. Dawn in Vasari halls meant the walls blushed from blue to rose and the stones hummed like a throat clearing. A messenger brought summons. Unity banquet. Zephyr rolled from her cot with a sigh that wasn't quite a groan. Should I be flattered or worried? Rian asked, following her down the corridor. Worried, she said. Unity banquets aren't unity. They're pressure tests wrapped in silk. The hall was stunning, carved basalt, living vines, light pooled like water. A rival stood at the far end in lacquered black, Vorik Tal, House Tal's heir. He watched Rian like a puzzle he wanted to break. The human who survived the resonance, Vorik said, letting the title hang. Impressive. Tell me, do you fight as well without your metal mind? Only one way to find out, Rian said, setting his glass down. Vorik smiled. Good. I would hate for the Conclave's entertainment to end with a simple trial. No weapons, declared the presiding elder. The crowd peeled back, leaving polished stone and expectation. Vorik came like a landslide, heavy, purposeful, deceptively fast. Rian kept out of the falling line, letting him overcommit. Zephyr stood at the edge of the circle, unreadable. You're strong, Rian said, stepping aside from an elbow that would have rattled ribs. But you telegraph. Vorik lunged. Rian closed the distance rather than giving ground, caught his knee just above the joint and hammered a heel into a pressure point. Vorik grunted, dropped to one knee before he caught himself. Not just a metal mind, Rian said lightly. Meals came in courses engineered by nanochefs to mirror mood. Rian's plate held steady, polite and bland. Mid-fourth course, the delicate green blossoms on Zephyr's plate flushed to crimson and exhaled heat. Spicy equals? Rian murmured. Irritation, she said without looking at him. At me? Zephyr turned, eyes cutting. You learn too fast. Before dessert, an aide intercepted them in the corridor. On vacade, she said, whiskers trembling. Your shuttle was compromised mid-flight. Grounded. Repairs underway. Zephyr's expression changed by inches. He will be lodged in secure quarters. The aide added. No, Zephyr said. He stays with me. Rian arched a brow. I didn't realize I made such good company. You're a target, Zephyr replied. Different category. Her quarters were high on the ridge, glass biting the sky. The moment the door sealed, the lights died. The air thinned. Rian's augments switched his vision to low light. Zephyr was already moving, pulling a short kinetic pistol from a hidden slot and tossing it to him. We're not staying, she said. Secondary exit. Move. The hatch behind the bed opened into a maintenance shaft barely wider than Rian's shoulders. They slid into the dark. Echoes gathered behind them, footsteps, too measured to be guards. At the junction, Zephyr dropped, landing silent as dusk. Rian followed, pulse flat by will, not by circuit. 3, he whispered. 2 right, 1 left. Mercenaries, she breathed. Hired blades. If we fire first, they switch to kill. Then we make them fire first. Rian slipped between cargo stacks. One merc clocked the movement, barked a shot. Good. Rian pivoted, dropped him with a low round. Zephyr used the noise to launch, fluid violence, efficient. The third backed toward a wall. Rian was already there, pistol under the chin before the man could squeeze the trigger. Names, Rian said. Or she finishes what she started. Tal, the man said, eyes flicking. Of course, Zephyr muttered. They tied the mercs with cargo straps and left them for security to find. Outside, twin moons rode high. Wind smelled like iron rain. Your people's lattice drills, Zephyr said as they cut through narrow streets. They're poisoning our deep aquifers. Not fast. But poison doesn't need speed to win. Rian studied her profile. And you? I protect my planet, she said. Even if that means protecting you. They reached an observation post on the western ridge, a wedge of stone and steel with views to the city's spine. Zephyr checked the rifles on the wall, tested shield emitters, locked every hatch twice. You've done this before, Rian said. Secured a target? She didn't look up. Too many times. I meant going rogue against political rivals. Her hands paused, then continued. I'm not rogue, she said. Yet. The first low rumbles of an ion storm grumbled against the dome. The shield hummed higher. Comms scrolled to black. How long? Rian asked. An hour. Or 6. They waited. The storm tightened like an idea. After a long silence, Zephyr spoke without looking at him. In the court, she said. When you had me pinned. Did you feel it? He didn't pretend. Yes. Dangerous, she said. Because I can't afford it. Because you don't want it, Rian said. Or because you do? She pulled a small device from a drawer, set it between them. This is a field thread, she said. Temporary. Complete link. No filters. If I'm going to keep you alive, I need to know what you feel before you act. You need to know me the same way. There's a catch, Rian said. Once we link, she said, we cannot lie to each other. He held her eyes. Good. I'm terrible at it. They snapped the bands to skin at their napes. The link hit like cold air after deep water. Memory and sensation braided, heartbeat layered heartbeat. She winced, then steadied. He stood very still inside the brightness. You're reckless, she said. You're relentless, he said. They stayed there, held not by touch but by something that felt a lot like the beginning of trust, until the storm began to thin. 2 minutes before the calms returned, the console chimed. Zephyr's fingers blurred across alerts. Security grid disruptions, she said. Power fluctuations. West Quarter. That's inside the private hall perimeter, Rian said. They moved. Drones hovered over scorched flagstones, opticals sweeping like cold eyes. Guards formed a crescent. Vorak stood at the center of their attention with his hands conspicuously empty, and his smile edged in glass. Anver, he said, switching to Terran with a fluency sharpened for mockery. Hiding behind a bodyguard. Zephyr didn't blink. You want him? She said. Go through me. Vorak's smile sharpened. Both of you then. The Hall of Blades in 3 days. Vasari rules. Unless you prefer Sabotage and Shadows. Rian stepped into the space Vorak left with his words. We accept, he said. Zephyr's mind snapped inside the thread. Are you out of your mind? Probably, he sent calm on purpose. But if we control the terms, we control the fight. The elders gathered them that afternoon in a chamber that smelled faintly of dust and long decisions. Elder Isla, silver fur braided with green threads, watched them with a gaze that could separate truth from habit. The conclave, Darren said, requires resolution. The Kareth cannot dangle. The city will not tolerate a coin flipping. You want us to bind or break, Zephyr said, tone flat. You want spectacle or closure. We want stability, Isla said. Call it what you like. Rian looked up at the balcony of elders, then at Zephyr. He didn't send the thought through the link, he said it aloud. If we bind, it's forever. Your brief says so. No severance without damage. Correct, Isla said softly. Our thread is not a contract. It is a nerve. Rian met Zephyr's gaze. Then I want your answer. Not theirs. Her eyes did not look away. If I say yes, we never get to pretend, she said. You will feel what I feel. You will know what I know. In 10 years, when you want space, you will not get it. Then I won't want it, he said. Darren lifted a hand. An attendant opened a box of polished obsidian. Inside, 2 cuffs, thin as decisions, lined with faintly glowing conduits. They will lock to your neural signatures, Darren said. They will not release in your lifetimes. Zephyr took hers without hesitation. Rian followed. When the cuffs touched, the thread slammed open, cleaner, deeper than the field thread. Not shock this time, but arrival. It is done, Isla said. The Kareth is resolved. Rian flexed his wrist, feeling the pulse tap his bones. Feels different. It is different, Zephyr said. And now you can't hide from me. Wouldn't dream of it. The alarms broke the rest of whatever ceremony was going to happen. Red sigils marched the wall. Outer lattice stabilizers tripping offline. A guard called. Inner array failing to hold. Sabotage, Zephyr said. Dual species biometrics required for override. The system chimed. Rian glanced at her. That's convenient. No, she said. Deliberate. They ran. The override chamber glowed blue and hot. A translucent barrier shimmered in front of the console like heat on a road. Zephyr pressed her left palm to the reader. Rian mirrored. The field dropped. Step away from the console, Commander. A voice crackled through the calm Vorik, laconic, amused. Or I vent the chamber. You'd kill half your own district, Zephyr said. If it prevents the Conclave from handing our atmosphere to human drills. Vorik said. Yes. Rian leaned toward the mic. Then fight me clean, he said. 3 days. Save your city the extra paperwork. A laugh. You're bound now, Vorik said. Killing you kills her. Why would I waste the discount? He cut the channel. Divide us, Rian said. He's trying. He'll fail, Zephyr said. Finish the sequence. They worked without words. The bond took the chatter out of teamwork, image for image, hand for hand. When the final lock slid, the core's glow steadied. Heat fell. Blue calmed. That's one crisis off the board, Rian said. That means the next is already in motion, Zephyr said. They took the lift with their breathing slowly aligning. Neither said the thought the thread had already shared, Vorik wouldn't stop. Not with a duel on the calendar, and a city's air between his teeth. Training blurred the next 40 hours into a sequence of brews and strategy. Zephyr's monofilament whip sang through the practice hall. Rian learned its breath, its warning hum, the way she used it as extension of her spine. Vorik expects you to lean on your augments, she said, snapping the whip around his wrist, tugging him off balance into a roll. So don't. I'm not planning to fight fair, Rian said, flipping to his feet. Good, she said. Neither is he. They mapped the hull of blades on a hollow table. Rian tapped a narrow corridor between weapon racks. Here, he said. Funnel him. Cut his exit. Zephyr tilted her head, unspooling scenarios into the thread. Works, she said. If we don't trap ourselves. Then we don't, he said. Sleep came late, thin. On the balcony above the city, wind combed Zephyr's fur into ripples of violet. Rian leaned on the rail. The thread let quiet be full. You ready? He asked. I'm ready to end the doubt, she said. Him, the whispers, the conclave pretending neutrality while pushing us toward the edge. Then we walk in together, he said. We walk out together. Her eyes held his. Agreement felt like a chord struck clean. The hull of blades smelled like old metal and old wagers. Elders rose, solemn and ancient. Vasari codes, Darren intoned. Combat until yield, incapacitation, or inability to continue. No lethals unless agreed. Agreed, Vorik said, twin blades like black water. Agreed, Zephyr and Rian said together. The gong's sound rolled the room. Vorik moved first, a crisscross that forced split attention. Rian took the left blade high on his forearm guard. Zephyr stepped inside the second line, parrying with a curved short sword that caught sparks. You've improved, Vorik said conversationally. He pressed, forcing Zephyr back. Rian grabbed a short spear from the rack, spun it. A spear? Vorik sneered. Humans like guns. I like distance, Rian said. He lunged. The spear aimed midsection, not to pierce but to shove. Vorik stepped back. Zephyr came over the top, blade drawing for the shoulder seam. Vorik had to choose, block high or low. He blocked high. The spear cracked his shin armor. He hissed, stance faltering. He adapted fast. He broke contact with Zephyr, pivoted to Rian in a flurry of cuts that stressed Rian's reflexes to the red line. The fourth strike would have gotten through. Zephyr caught it, their blades ringing, strain punching up her arm into Rian's bones through the thread. Stay, Rian sent. I'm not leaving, she returned. Switch, she sent a breath later. He dropped low, swept. She came down fast. Vorik couldn't block both. The sweep landed. His knee dipped. Zephyr's whip lashed, caught a blade, tore it free to clatter across stone. Yield, Rian said, spear tip an inch from Vorik's throat. Vorik's jaw flexed. You chained yourself to him and call it strength? He spat at Zephyr. You could have been the finest of your generation. Better than rotting alone in your pride, she said. The hall had cooled to silence. Vorik dropped his remaining blade. I yield. The gong boomed. Noise detonated, cheers, angry hisses, the low thunder of surprise. You're bleeding, Zephyr said under the roar. Just a scratch, Rian said, feeling her concern fold into his ribcage. We walk out together. We do, she said. They didn't make it far into the corridor before Commander Rail, tall, scar-across muzzle, stepped into their path with a squad at his back. By order of Conclave Security, he said, you and your bound are to be taken into protective custody. Rian glanced around. That sounds a lot like arrest. Tensions are volatile, Rail said. Credible threats. Origin? Zephyr asked. That's not for me to say. Through the thread, her suspicion flashed. This isn't protection. It's containment. Agreed, he sent. Aloud he said. If the Conclave wants to speak to us, they can summon us. Publicly. Rail's ears tilted back a degree. After a long breath he stepped aside. Then stay to well-guarded places, Commander. Anva. They didn't nod. They didn't look back. By the time they reached their quarters, a message waited on Rian's implant, coded in a style he hadn't seen since a Black Ops posting he no longer admitted to. If you want proof, come to the West Belt Underdock. Midnight. Alone. Trap, Zephyr sent. Definitely, he agreed. Worth springing. Not alone, she sent, a flicker of grin in the link. They arrived early, shadows under shadows. At midnight, a solitary figure stepped from a service tunnel, Vasari in plain clothes, hood low. Kareth, Zephyr breathed. Logistics. Core maintenance. He placed a data wafer on a crate, stepped back. The shadows behind him thickened into 6 soldiers in matte black armor. Vorik appeared last, posture relaxed as a confession. You said, Kareth began. I said I would decide, Vorik answered. I decide now. Mark, Zephyr sent. They dropped like coins. Rian took the legs of the nearest soldier, rolled through. Zephyr cut the second down with 3 strokes so clean they sounded like a song. The third turned his muzzle for a shot. Rian barrel-checked him hard into a 4th. You like stepping into my plays? Vorik called. I like rewriting the ending, Rian said, breath steady. When the 6th went down, Vorik had already moved, retreating down a tunnel. Pursuit tasted wrong. Zephyr wanted to end it now. Rian wanted the same. They went anyway. Bait, Zephyr sent. Bite, Rian returned. The tunnel opened into a round chamber ribbed with conduits. Vorik stood in the center like a thesis. You think this is about your romance? He said. Your bond? It's about rot. The human deal always ends with our bones in your scaffolding. You sabotaged the lattice network, Zephyr said. You risked millions. Better a sharp wound now than a slow bleed. He moved. The fight was harder than the hall. No spectators, no rules, no honorifics. He had studied them. He jabbed the gaps in their rhythm, forced them to misstep. At one wicked turn he nearly took Zephyr across the ribs. Rian intercepted, took a shallow cut across his forearm. Pain smarted into the thread. Zephyr flinched and recovered, fury cold and useful. They changed tactics. Rian baited, Vorik overcommit. Zephyr punished. On the third set she sliced his flank deep. He staggered. Rian closed, knife reversed. "This is your last chance," Rian said. Vorik's eyes burned. "Even if you kill me, others are already moving. The conclave is split, your bond is their favorite wedge." He lowered his blade and backed into a side tunnel. "Enjoy the quiet while it lasts," he said, and was gone. They let him go. Sometimes you cut, sometimes you leash. Back in their rooms, bandaged and bone-tired, Zephyr leaned against the door and watched him. "You bled for me. Again." "I'll do it as often as required," Rian said. Her mouth curved into something dangerous and honest. "Then you're not getting out of this thread alive." She crossed the space and kissed him. The thread made contact a chorus. He answered with the simplest thought he had. "Mine." A beat later hers came back, steel wrapped in heat. "Yours." By morning the summons hit. The conclave chamber was fuller than any day prior, the air vibrating with words not yet said. Darren stood. "Commander Knox. On Vacade. You have defied orders, exposed sabotage, and saved a corps. You have also fought duels sanctioned only by tradition. Some of us call for your expulsion," Elder Varela said, tail flicking like a metronome. "Others for recognition." Rian stepped into the center. "Argue about humans all you like," he said. "While you do, your enemies cooperate. Vorik isn't alone. The next time the lattice shakes you may not have 3 days to decide if we're allowed to act." Zephyr didn't soften her voice. "This is no longer about drilling rights. It is about survival. You want to keep Nearest 5 breathing? You need both of us. And you need to choose." The chamber stilled. Darren and Isla traded a look with meanings inside meanings. Then Isla stood. "The conclave will recognize the thread," she said, "and grant shared oversight of the atmospheric lattice to both species." Rian felt Zephyr's relief through the thread. He kept his face still because politics like still faces. He sent her a quiet thought anyway. "Bigger target on our backs." "Good," she returned. "Let them aim at us, not the city." That night the city lowered its voice. On their balcony, they split a bottle of Vasari black wine and watched the shield shimmer where the aurora touched them. "You know," Rian said, "if you told me a month ago I'd be standing in front of an alien conclave, fighting a man with 2 swords, then ending the day like this, you wouldn't have believed it," Zephyr said. "I'd have believed the part about you," he said. She traced the new scar on his forearm with a careful claw. "You bleed too easily." "Not for you," he said. "Then stay close," she murmured. "Nearest 5 still needs you." "Not as much as I do," he said, and meant it. They didn't have to hunt the mole. The mole came hunting. A courier's slate delivered access credentials to an archive no outsider should touch. Council Layer 7, Audit Subgrid, Signatures Masked. Zephyr cross-checked. "This is real," she said, frustration cutting. "Or good enough to walk like real." They went in quiet, through service entries and events Zephyr swore she had never used on duty. The archive smelled like cold dust. Rian's augments threw schematics into his side vision. Zephyr's whiskers quivered at frequencies his hardware could not hear. "Left," she sent. Then the stair. Layer 7 held fiscal ledgers and maintenance rosters and a vein of memos stitched with patience and malice. The pattern was almost pretty once you saw it. Small shifts, tiny overcharges, a requisition here, a late signature there, all angled toward zones where conclave oversight thinned. A shadow moved 6 stacks down. "Hello, Elder Varela," Zephyr said, not loud. The elder stepped into view with a calm so smooth it squeaked. "Commander Knox. On Vacade." Her tail wrote an even script in the air. You shouldn't be here. We could say the same, Rian said. Varela smiled like a knife polishing itself. You think you have a scandal? You have arithmetic. The conclave will eat it for breakfast and ask for seconds. You routed funds to Tal's shadow accounts, Zephyr said. You paid for the sabotage that nearly tore our sky. You have no proof that will survive a vote, Varela replied. And the votes are what matter. Rian sent a thought across the thread, the way he would to a teammate pinned under fire. She wants us to go public too early. Then we don't, Zephyr returned. We go sideways. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't chase. They left with copies and mirrored copies and a plan to drop the truth not like a shout but like a floor. The next crisis arrived on a day that started with clear weather and polite agendas. A fault wave rippled through the storm-fence turbines along the equatorial belt, a cascade failure with a signature that looked like an accident until you turned it 90 degrees. Vorik learned, Zephyr said. He's hiding the hand. They flew in a small skimmer over a silver sea. The storm fence rose ahead, a kilometer of towers catching lightning and turning it into song. On the platform, Tex ran with the grounded terror of those whose work is made from live knives. The frequency lock is thrown, a tech panted. We can't get the gates to take a reset. Manual? Zephyr asked. The tech looked at Rian. Dual species again. Rian touched the first panel and felt the buzz climb his bones. Music, he said. The lock wants a chord. Zephyr's ears tilted. CFA, she murmured. Old Vasari triad for oath binding. Rian tapped in C with a fingertip. Zephyr followed with F. He hit A, the gates shuddered. Wind went from howl to hum. The platform exhaled as if it were alive. Whoever wrote that, Rian said, had a sense of humor. Or a sense of irony, Zephyr said. Oaths and storm fences. A runner skidded to a stop. There's more, he said. A convoy hit on the southern road. House Tal colors on the wreckage, but it looks staged. Of course it does, Zephyr said. They split work, thread weaving from opposite ends of the map. By night they had a chain, staged attacks to frame rivals, silent depletion of lattice reserves, a rumor engine designed to make humans look like wolves at the door. We don't have time to litigate this, Rian said. We need to cut the network. Which means we need a witness, Zephyr said. Someone Tal trusts enough to brag to. Kareth, Rian said. Kareth, Zephyr agreed. They chose the South Skybridge because it was photogenic. Vorik liked theater. He would not resist. Kareth stood alone at the center of the span, robe tugged by high wind, courage held together by string. Vorik came with 4, not 6. Overconfidence and efficiency had identical footprints. You think I didn't learn from the underdog? Vorik called, stopping 10 meters from Kareth. I brought fewer witnesses this time. Good, Rian said from the opposite end. Fewer apologies. They didn't drop from above. They walked, visible, palms open, because sometimes bait works better when it knows you can see the hook. Vorik moved first, because he always did. Zephyr turned his cut. Rian stepped inside the angle. Kareth ducked and lived. One guard went over the rail. The second met Zephyr's whip and decided he wanted to keep both eyes. The third tried to flank. Rian kicked the knee backward. Vorik saw Kareth flee and chose rage over efficiency. It cost him. Zephyr slid under his blade, slashed the belt that held his offhand knife, and stamped it away. Yield, Rian said again. Or say something we can use. Vorik smiled, all teeth. You think the elders didn't send you to this bridge? You think they don't like seeing who will bleed? You two are useful because you are loud. Kareth, Zephyr said without looking away. Tell the conclave what you did. Kareth swallowed. Elder Varela paid us, he said, voice shaking. For maintenance delays and misreported stock. For access. Her aide delivered the keys. The words went into 6 recording drones they hadn't acknowledged until now. The conclave would see them by sunset. Vorik saw the drones, calculated, and threw himself backward over the rail onto a maintenance gantry, then into a service hatch. Zephyr started for him. Let him run, Rian said. We just changed the vote. She stopped. For now. For now, he agreed. The conclave did not thank them. It rarely did. But the footage made the rounds. Varella's tale no longer wrote even scripts. Questions multiplied like rain. They sat for exactly 1 hour before the counterpunch landed, an attack on the inner array masked as a training accident. By the time Rian and Zephyr arrived, alarms were a red choir. The lock in the inner array wasn't music. It was a puzzle with missing pieces and the answer written in a language that assumed you were already in love with it. Tal's engineer, Zephyr said, studying the glyphs. Arrogant. Good at it. Rian breathed out, empty noise. He left himself a door, he said. Ego always does. He pressed a sequence he would have bet drinks on in another life. The lock laughed. He swore softly, then smiled and reversed the pattern. The door opened. Lattice pressure bled. The city exhaled again. You keep doing that, Zephyr said. What? Assuming people like Vorik will be predictable, she said. They are, he said. They have to be. Righteousness needs rhythm. They captured a Tal lieutenant in the array's shadow, young, fast, full of borrowed certainty. Under Zephyr's eyes and Rian's patient silence, the certainty cracked. There's a list, he muttered. Names. Payments. Meeting points. It's all on a spool in the old foundry. Thank you, Zephyr said. It sounded like she meant it. The thread glowed a shade warmer. The old foundry crouched under the city like a fist you forgot you were making. Heat ghosts clung to its steel ribs. They moved through it in the careful way you move through a room that might still be full of hurt. The spool was real, tucked inside the bell of a defunct press. It held names that would rearrange chairs and knives across the city. Darren, Zephyr said softly. He knew. He didn't say. He balanced. Balance looks like complicity from down here, Rian said. From up there, it looks like survival. Maybe we should move the definition of up and down. She looked at him for a long second, then nodded once. They were still reading when the foundry woke. Rian felt it first in his teeth, the tremor of an incoming charge. Explosives 2 levels down. He didn't think. He grabbed Zephyr and pulled. The blast lifted rust into the air like confetti. The world rang. They rolled into cover, alive because timing like them today. The thread jittered then steadied. Vorik stood on the catwalk with a detonator in his hand and something like respect finally creasing his mouth. You never stop, he said. Occupational hazard, Rian said. Vorik chose not to shoot. He dropped the detonator and left with the crisp efficiency of a man who had just realized he could still be useful later. We have what we need, Zephyr said, climbing, ears flat, eyes bright. We take it public. No votes. No committees. Broadcast. Then the storm comes, Rian said. Let it, Zephyr said. I'd rather it hit us than the lattice. They chose the highest bridge for the final call because Vorik would. Dawn painted the shield line in thin gold. The city below was very awake. This ends now, Zephyr said into the conclave's open channel. House Tal's sabotage, elder complicity, all of it. The names are already mirrored to every archive. If you cut the feeds, the mirror opens anyway. Vorik arrived alone, because by then he had nothing left but himself. You'll burn the conclave, he said. It needs burning, Zephyr said. Or rebuilding. You think the human will stay when the smoke clears? Vorik asked, chin toward Rian. Rian took one step forward. You keep talking like we're seasons, he said. We're a climate. Vorik smiled, sad and sharp. Then weather this. He came fast and very honest. No tricks. No hired knives. They fought like people who knew how the other thought, because by now they did. It was longer than the hall, shorter than the underdock. It ended when Zephyr took Vorik's wrist at the precise angle she had practiced 1,000 times, and Rian took his balance with a shoulder he would feel for a week. Vorik went to his knees. "Finish it," he said. "No," Zephyr said. "You don't get the honor. You get a cell and a mirror to watch yourself with." The conclave did not cheer. It did not boo. It watched the names scroll. It watched Elder Varela resign. It watched Darren bow his head and admit the shape of his choices. That night the city was almost quiet. On the balcony, wine again, wind again, the thread a steady pulse in their wrists and the spaces between their ribs. "You know," Rian said, "I keep thinking there's an end to this." "There is," Zephyr said. "Then another beginning." He took her hand. "Stay? Always." Above the domes, the storm gathered because storms always do. Below, the lattice sang. They faced it together, bound by nerve and vow and everything they had not known they needed until it was the only thing that made sense. The balcony wine was barely finished when the first ripple broke their brief calm. The thread carried it first, Zephyr's ears stiffening before the city alarms even rose. Sirens cut through the night, echoing up the ridges like wolves chasing each other. Below, the lattice shimmered in unnatural patterns, like lightning running backward. Rian's augments fed him a dozen reports at once, drone feeds, chatter intercepts, conclave warnings scrambled with static. "Orbital interference," he said grimly. "Not local sabotage." Zephyr's hand tightened on the rail. "Someone out-system just blinked at us." The thread carried the sharp taste of her realization. This wasn't Vorik anymore. Or not only Vorik. Whoever backed him wasn't content with ground games. They wanted to shake the sky itself. Conclave guards were already on the move, funneling crowds toward shelters carved into the ridge. The shield line above the city sputtered, held, then flickered again. Zephyr pulled her combat harness from its rack and threw the spare vest at him. "Rian!" "I know," he said, already fastening it. Together. They moved through narrow stone streets as the shield line failed in patches, letting cosmic light bleed down in angry auroras. Panic rolled through the markets. Vendors abandoned stalls, families clutched children. The bond made the chaos feel doubled, each scream an echo in both their ribs. By the time they reached the command post at the western cliff, Elder Darren was already there, tail stiff. "It's orbital," he admitted without preamble. "Weapons grid signatures we don't recognize." "Not Tal," Zephyr said, tone clipped. "No," Darren agreed. "Tal never had this reach." Rian frowned. "But someone gave him a leash long enough to tug the lattice. Which means they're coming back to yank." Zephyr's claws tapped against the console as her mind threaded through his. "They're escalating. Which means we need proof of who they are before the conclave pretends to negotiate. And before the city burns," Rian returned. The next alert hit like a hammer. Orbital debris impact predicted within one cycle. Hundreds of tons of wreckage, guided not random. Someone was throwing broken moons at them. Zephyr's jaw clenched. "They're not hiding anymore." Rian looked at her, the thread burning steady. "Then neither should we." The warning klaxons carried through the ridge tunnels like a second heartbeat. On the high displays, scarlet vectors streaked toward nearest 5, each line marking an incoming fragment of orbital wreckage. The conclave chamber had emptied into command shelters, but Zephyr refused to join them. "This isn't defense," she snapped, her claws skating across a console. "It's a slow funeral if we just hide." Rian's augments sketched trajectories in his vision, highlighting one debris path curling toward the eastern colonies. "Impact radius covers 40 kilometers. That's not a funeral, that's extinction." "Then we stop it." The thread carried his doubt, and her resolve back and forth like echoes. He breathed once, deeply. "Give me the vector data. My shuttle's frame can." "No," she cut in sharply. "A solo run is suicide." "Maybe," he said, voice steady. "But if I take one of the fragments off course, I buy us hours. Hours for you to realign the storm fence." She stared at him, the thread heavy between them. "You'd die for hours?" "I'd die for you," he said simply. But I'd rather live for you. So find me the math that makes that happen. Her lips curled back from her teeth, not a smile, but something just as sharp. Fine. But you're not going alone. They moved fast, threading between panicked technicians and conclave aides shouting for order. Zephyr commandeered a twin-seater interceptor docked on the western pad, its silver hull vibrating from half-charged plasma coils. As the canopy sealed, the thread hummed hotter, aligning them tighter than any cockpit systems could. The launch burned their spines into the seats. Atmosphere dropped away, leaving black sky and a debris storm that glittered like a shattered crown. Rian gripped the controls, muscles tense. Zephyr's hands danced across auxiliary panels, diverting power where his mind hadn't yet reached. 2 fragments first, she said. Smaller, fast. Break them and the lattice won't rupture. Copy, he said, but he didn't need to. She already felt the steel focus in his bones. The first impact course loomed. Rian pitched hard, thrusters screaming. The interceptor's cannons lit space with violet lances. 1 fragment disintegrated into frozen dust. The second clipped their shield, rattling the frame. Pain shot down his side. Through the thread, Zephyr flinched. Still with me? She demanded. Always, he said, blood slick on his glove. Line up the big one. And ahead of them, like a mountain falling from heaven, the largest shard spun toward the city. The fragment rotated slowly in the black, a jagged monolith of iron and ice lit by the sun's cold fire. Even Rian's augments struggled to frame it. It was simply too massive, kilometers across, death wearing the mask of inevitability. Shield lattice can't absorb it, Zephyr said, her hands a blur on the panels. If it makes atmosphere, the shockwave will gut half the continent. Then we change its mind about where it's going, Rian muttered. He tightened his grip on the flight yoke. Options? Zephyr's ears flattened. We don't have weapons big enough. We use thrust. Rian raised an eyebrow. Our thrust? Against that? Not alone, she said. The storm fence towers carry reserve capacitors. If we tether the fragment's path and bleed those capacitors through resonance, we can bend it. Maybe just enough to miss. The thread carried her calculation into him before she finished speaking, the math, the risk, the edge. His chest tightened. We'd have to anchor from inside the fragment's spin. Yes, she admitted. And 1 wrong vector burns us into the rock. Silence stretched. He could feel her heartbeat quick under her ribs through the bond. He breathed once, steady. Then we don't miss. They dove. Thrusters screamed as the interceptor knifed toward the fragment's ragged surface. Shards the size of houses broke loose and spun past them. Zephyr's claws dug into the console, rerouting power to lateral jets. Rian's vision narrowed until there was only trajectory and timing. At the fragment's belly, jagged cliffs of frozen methane opened like teeth. Rian threaded the ship between them, close enough that dust lashed their shields. Zephyr extended the resonance tethers, 2 cables that spat plasma hooks into stone. They buried themselves with explosive anchors. Stormfence link live, she said, her throat tight. Resonance bleed in 30 seconds. The ship jolted, the fragment's rotation trying to tear them loose. Pain lanced through Rian's arms as he held the yoke steady, and she felt every inch of it in her own nerves. You can't hold this, she hissed through clenched teeth. I can, he grunted. Because you're holding it with me. The countdown hit 0. Energy surged down the tethers, a roar of violet light ripping across vacuum. The fragment shuddered. For a terrible second, nothing happened, then its rotation shifted, just enough. Its path bent. The projected impact arc veered wide of the cities, toward an empty ocean trench. They tore free of the anchors, engines flaring to escape velocity. Behind them, the mountain fell, not on nearest 5, but into the dark sea far beyond its shores. The shockwave still tore the ocean wide, but the cities lived. Breathing hard, Rian slumped back in his chair. Blood ran from his forearm where the harness had bitten deep. Zephyr reached across, gripped his hand hard. Reckless, she whispered. Effective, he said, lips twitching. Through the thread, relief burned so fierce it almost hurt. And beneath it, something more dangerous, something neither of them pretended not to feel anymore. The ocean swallowed the falling mountain with a scream. Sensors across nearest 5 lit the sky with red sigils as shockwaves rolled outward. The great trench drank the energy, but not all of it. Fishing colonies along the southern shelf went dark in a single blink, their comms cut midward. Back in orbit, the interceptor bucked through turbulence that shouldn't have existed in vacuum, residual resonance from the tether bleed. Rian's hands shook on the controls. Zephyr didn't comment, she simply reached across the small space and steadied his wrist. The thread pulsed with both their exhaustion, their raw nerves, their relief. She exhaled slowly. We bent a mountain, she sent, disbelief and pride tangled. We bent it, Rian answered. Together. By the time they broke atmosphere, Conclave Command had already spun their own version of events. Darren's voice filled the channels. Catastrophe averted by the combined valor of Commander Knox and Envoy Cade. The thread proves its strength. Zephyr's tail lashed once against her seat. They'll polish this into propaganda before we even touch the ground. Let them, Rian said, eyes half closed. Better propaganda than funerals. But the cost spread faster than words. Reports filtered in, 67 confirmed dead in the southern colonies, hundreds injured. Infrastructure drowned. Supplies cut. And beneath the grief came the anger, whispers that human presence had drawn the sky's fire, that the thread was a beacon for catastrophe. The conclave convened before dusk. The chamber felt different now, full of fear disguised as ceremony. Elder Varela, bruised by exposure yet still dangerous, stood tall enough to sneer. You see? She said, voice sharp. Our bond with outsiders draws outsiders' wrath. The heavens themselves reject it. Zephyr's claws dug shallow grooves in the wood of her seat. Rian felt her fury through the thread, a wildfire barely checked. He placed a hand on the table, grounding her. His voice was even. The heavens didn't choose this. Saboteurs did. And they're among you. The murmur that followed wasn't simple disapproval. It was fear. The counselors shifted in their chairs, not because they doubted, but because too many already suspected the truth. Darren raised his voice over the noise. Enough. The investigation continues. But know this, without the thread, nearest 5 would lie in ruin tonight. Rian leaned back, gaze steady on Varela. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you should ask who you've been dining with in the shadows. Silence followed him out of the chamber. Later, on their balcony, Zephyr stared out over a skyline lit in anxious fires. They'll keep pushing. They'll twist the deaths against us. Rian set the half-empty bottle down. Then we give them a bigger truth to swallow. One they can't spit back. The thread thrummed between them, and for the first time Zephyr didn't argue. Morning came with smoke. The southern colonies burned at the edges, emergency crews stringing lights across blackened water. The city itself hummed in an unnatural quiet, as if every citizen was waiting to see which way the sky would lean. Rian and Zephyr didn't wait. The thread pulsed with a single shared decision, fine proof before the conclave buried the truth under speeches. They started with the foundry spool they'd stolen cycles ago. Rian spread the projection across their quarters table, columns of payments, supply diversions, coded transfers. Zephyr prowled around it, tail lashing. We have Varela. That much is clear. But this, she jabbed at a string of numbers, isn't her alone. External routing, Rian confirmed, fingers flicking the data. Cross-system bounce. Whoever pulled this owns ships off-world. Zephyr's ears twitched. Then Tal wasn't the mastermind. Just the leash dog. And leash dogs don't drop orbital debris. Rian added. The thread carried her unease sharp as lightning. Someone bigger. Someone with reach. That was when the message arrived, encoded on Rian's implant, piggybacked through an old Terran military cipher almost no one alive should have known. The words were simple, Doc 77. Midnight. Proof. Zephyr read it with him through the bond, lips curling. Bait. Of course, he said. but maybe baked with teeth. Dock 77 smelled of salt and machine oil. Cargo cranes loomed like skeletons against the twin moons. They came early, shadows and shadows. When midnight hit, a figure in courier gray appeared, carrying a sealed data case. "Kareth," Zephyr whispered. But before he could speak, the dark cracked with weapons fire. Snipers on the gantries, mercenaries in matte armor, their visors gleaming. Kareth dropped the case and dove for cover. "Not a handoff," Rian growled. "An execution." Zephyr was already moving, whip flashing out to catch a sniper's rifle, yanking it from the perch. Rian slid behind a cargo hauler, returning fire with brutal efficiency. The thread turned chaos into choreography. When he rolled left, she was already covering his flank. When her whip snapped right, he ducked instinctively under its arc. They reached Kareth, dragging him behind cover. His breath came ragged. "It's true," he gasped. "Varela's payments, off-world credits. Syndicate called the Aurelian Pact. They'd been using Tal as a mask." He shoved the case toward them. "Everything's inside." Another volley peppered their cover. Zephyr hissed, ears flat. "We can't stay." Rian slung the case across his back. "Then we run." They broke through the trap in tandem, leaving 3 mercs unconscious, 2 bleeding, 1 dangling from Zephyr's whip. By the time they reached the skybridge, alarms already echoed through the docks. Rian pressed the case into Zephyr's hands. "That's our bullet," he said. She bared her teeth, equal parts fury and triumph. "Then we aim for the Council's heart." The data case glowed faintly as Zephyr placed it on the conclave's central table. Elders leaned forward like carrion birds scenting fresh kill. Every eye in the chamber tracked the two of them as if their shadows might burst into flame. Elder Varela's tail lashed once. "More theatrics? You bring us stolen ledgers and call them proof?" Zephyr didn't speak, she simply keyed the release. A lattice of light spilled into the air. Transactions, off-world accounts, shipments tagged to the Aurelian Pact. The names were undeniable. The sums too large to dismiss as rumor. And every trail looped back to Tal's banners. The chamber murmured like an awakening hive. Darren's ears twitched as he scrolled the projection. "These routes are impossible without council clearance. Someone high allowed this." Varela's mouth was thin. "Forgery. Then you won't mind if we trace your personal seal embedded in half the transfers?" Rian said, his voice cool, almost conversational. The thread carried Zephyr's satisfaction into him, sharp and bright. For the first time, Varela flinched. But the victory was jagged. Darren rapped the table with a claw. "Proof of pact influence is proof of war. If the conclave declares it, our skies burn for decades." Rian stood straighter. "Then you don't declare war. You expose rot. Clean your own house before you pretend to fight someone else's." The chamber erupted into argument, voices clashing like blades. Zephyr leaned toward him, voice low. "Half of them want to hang us with this. Call us destabilizers, exiles. Better scapegoats than solutions. And the other half?" Rian sent through the bond. Her eyes flicked toward Isla, the elder who had first named the thread binding. "The other half sees what we are, an answer they didn't ask for but can't ignore." The session ended without resolution. Guards escorted them not back to quarters, but to a waiting chamber lined with obsidian, soft lights meant to feel like comfort. It didn't. "They're stalling," Zephyr said, pacing. "Delaying the vote until the Pact's knives cut us again." Rian set the case on the desk, fingers tapping against its metal shell. "Then we move before they do. Leak the files beyond the council. The people deserve to know." Zephyr paused mid-step, eyes narrowing. "That would turn this from politics to revolution." "Maybe," Rian said. "But better a revolution of truth than a war of shadows." The thread pulsed between them, her hesitation, his certainty, the shared edge where both met. Slowly she nodded. "Then we don't just leak. We make them listen." The files didn't trickle. They detonated. By dawn, every display wall in nearest Five's core districts pulsed with cascading ledgers, credits funneled to Tal, shipments marked with the Aurelian Pact's sigil, signatures of elders who had sworn otherwise. The people saw. And once they saw, they refused silence. Crowds filled the sky bridges, chanting in rhythms that shook the steel. Vendors abandoned markets to march. Engineers left the lattice towers midshift, still in work rigs, holding signs lit with angry glyphs, "No more lies." Rian and Zephyr watched from a balcony as the tide built. The thread carried the storm into their ribs. Hope and rage tangled together. "They'll call this sedition," Zephyr said, her tone hard. "Maybe," Rian replied. "But it's truth. And truth doesn't need permission." The conclave responded fast. Security squads in black armor lined the plazas, forming cordons. But they hesitated. Because many wore expressions that matched the crowd, and more than a few had kin among the marchers. Varela appeared on a high platform, her voice amplified by lattice towers. "You are being deceived! The human envoy and his consort twist false records to divide us." The jeers nearly drowned her. Rian felt the shift through the thread, like a current reversing. The people weren't buying it. Not anymore. Then the first shot cracked. A mercenary, not conclave guard, fired into the crowd. Screams erupted. Panic surged like wildfire. Zephyr was already moving, dropping from the balcony with whip coiled. Rian followed, augments amplifying his stride. The crowd buckled, people shoving for cover. Another merc raised his rifle. Rian tackled him sideways, wrenching the weapon away. Pain flared up his ribs, echoed in Zephyr's breath as if it were her own. "Not conclave," she hissed, striking another merc with surgical precision. "Pack soldiers dressed in black. They want chaos," Rian said, voice raw. "They'll get war if we let this stand." Together they cut through the merc line, the thread letting them move like one body split into two shapes. By the time conclave guards realized who was firing, 3 mercs were down, 2 bound, 1 crawling for escape. The crowd had seen everything. Chants turned into roars, packed out. "Council cleanse!" Rian hauled the captured merc to his knees, tearing off the visor. The sigil burned across the inside collar, Aurelian Pact branded like ownership. He shoved the prisoner forward where the people could see. "Not us!" Rian shouted, voice carried by amplifiers. "Not humans! Not conclave guards! The Pact!" The roar shook the stones themselves. And this time, no elder could stop it. By nightfall, Nearest 5 felt like it stood on the edge of a blade. The streets below the conclave burned with torchlight. Chants rolled like surf against the stone walls. Inside the chamber, the elders looked less like rulers and more like animals cornered by their own reflection. Elder Varela still held her ground, her tail stiff as iron. "You see what they've done?" she hissed. "They have unleashed mobs against us. They are destabilizers, bound together by something unnatural. Tear the thread apart before it consumes our world." Darren's ears flicked back. "The thread saved this world from ruin twice in as many cycles." "Coincidence!" Varela snapped. "Each catastrophe grew from their presence." Rian stepped forward, hands braced on the obsidian table. His voice carried clear, sharpened by the bond with Zephyr. "The Pact played you. Paid you. And now they burn your cities because you let them in." His eyes cut to the rows of elders who had stayed silent too long. "The people outside don't want speeches. They want names. They want answers." Isla rose from her seat. "They want survival," she said, voice heavy. "And survival will not come from denial." Her gaze shifted across the chamber, pinning each counselor in turn. "We must vote." Varela's lips peeled back. "You would hand sovereignty to outsiders?" Zephyr finally spoke, her voice low but cold enough to frost the air. "I am not handing anything to anyone. I am Vasari. I bleed Vasari. And I bound myself to him because he fights for this planet harder than half of you ever have." The thread carried her fire into Rian's chest. He felt it like a second heart. He added only 2 words. "We stand." The chamber split. Half the elders rose with Isla, their voices steady, recognition of the thread, sanction against the pact, exile for Varela. The other half hesitated, tails twitching, eyes darting to shadows where they thought safety might hide. The vote was cast. Varela lost. Her hiss cut the air. You think this ends with a vote? The pact does not bow to ballots. Guards moved to flank her, but she smiled, baring fangs. You have chosen sides. Pray you survive long enough to regret it. As she was dragged out, the city's alarms howled again, long, low, not for debris this time, but for incoming ships breaching atmosphere. Zephyr's claws dug into the table. The pact isn't waiting for the dust to settle. Rian's augments lit with emergency feeds, a fleet signature punching through the upper layers. Not raiders. Not mercenaries. Warships. He met Zephyr's gaze. The thread throbbed hot. Then we fight a war. The first packed warship cracked atmosphere like a thunderclap, its hull a black crescent streaked with fire. Behind it came three more, smaller but bristling with weapon pods. They didn't come quietly. Their entry trails turned the sky into burning scars. From the conclave plaza, the people looked up in silence, the chants strangled in their throats. Then the bombardment began. The first volley wasn't aimed at the council hall. It struck the southern docks, warehouses, freight yards, the arteries of the city. Explosions rippled in orange blooms, and the shockwaves slapped the ridge like an open hand. Rian's augments filled with screaming reports, casualty estimates, structural collapses, atmospheric breach warnings. He forced the data into order, triaging in real time. 3 hours, he told Zephyr grimly. That's how long before the lattice overloads under sustained fire. Zephyr's claws flexed against the table. Then we cut their teeth before they get a second strike. Fleet versus interceptors? Darren said, incredulous. You'll be slaughtered. Rian looked at him, eyes steady. Not if we use the lattice against them. The thread carried the idea between him and Zephyr in a heartbeat. Storm fence towers amplified through resonance, not just for defense but for offense. They could turn the atmosphere itself into a weapon. Zephyr didn't waste time explaining. Authorize full lattice control to us. Elders hissed, tails lashing. That's madness. It's survival, she snapped. Vote now or watch your cities burn. Isila's paw struck the table. Granted. Minutes later they were racing through the corridors toward the launch pad, conclave guards parting before them. The air smelled of ozone and smoke, the kind of air that comes before a planet learns if it will live or die. The interceptor rattled as it left the ridge, canopy reflecting the hell below. Fires spread across the docks. Distant colonies flickered as communications cut. Above them, the packed warships turned like sharks, angling for another strike. Rian's hands flew over controls. Zephyr jacked directly into the lattice feed, her whiskers quivering from the charge. Resonance arrays live. Synchronizing. On my mark, Rian said. Through the thread she answered not with words, but with fire. The storm fence towers lit one by one, arcs of violet leaping skyward. The warships adjusted course, too late. The atmosphere itself screamed, coalescing into a sheet of lightning that slammed across the lead cruiser's bow. Metal shrieked. Armor peeled. The ship staggered, bleeding fire into the sky. The people on the ground saw it and roared. For the first time, the pact bled above nearest 5. Zephyr's voice was ragged but fierce. 1 down. 3 to go. Rian wiped blood from his lip where the harness had cut. Then let's make it a clean sweep. The first cruiser's carcass hadn't even finished falling when the other 3 opened fire. Brilliant lances of plasma tore the sky, hammering into the ridge shields. Stone fractured, sending chunks cascading into the lower districts. Entire bridges crumbled in a heartbeat. Shields at 60%! Zephyr barked, voice clipped through the thread. She rerouted power from half a dozen lattice towers, their humming rising to a shriek. We can't hold like this. Then we don't, Rian growled. We hit back. He dove the interceptor into the storm fence field, so close the hull shimmered with static discharge. Alarms screamed in his augments, but he forced the ship through the chaos. Bleed it through me, he said. Feed every jewel you can into the lattice arcs. Zephyr's claws flashed across the console. You'll cook your augments. Better fried than fried planet. The towers flared again. This time, instead of a single bolt, the resonance snapped into a web, threads of lightning weaving between ships and sky. The second cruiser staggered, shields collapsing in showers of sparks. The web tore through its flank, splitting its hull in two. The third ship veered hard, firing in blind desperation. One plasma lance grazed the interceptor, the shock jolting Rian's chest so hard his vision blurred. Zephyr felt it through the thread and hissed, clutching her ribs. Still flying, he rasped, gripping the yoke tighter. Line up the next. But the pact wasn't panicked. The fourth ship broke formation, descending lower, ignoring the lattice entirely. Its weapons didn't aim for towers or ridges, they aimed for the crowd itself. Zephyr's scream tore through the thread, not in fear but in fury. They're targeting civilians! Rian's jaw locked. Not while we're breathing. He throttled forward, the interceptor shuddering as they broke through the storm fence arc. Zephyr rerouted every remaining capacitor, her body shaking from the feedback. Together they hurled the ship straight into the cruiser's firing line, resonance hooks extending like claws. Now! She roared. The hooks latched. Energy cascaded. The entire sky erupted in violet thunder as the cruiser overloaded, detonating in a corona of flame that painted the heavens. The crowd below screamed, not in terror but in triumph. For the first time in living memory, the Vasari had seen an enemy fleet fall before their own eyes. Rian slumped back, chest heaving, blood in his mouth. Zephyr steadied his arm, her own fur scorched from arcing feedback. Through the thread, she sent only one word. Together. The last ship turned, retreating into the upper atmosphere. But even as it fled, Rian's augments caught the message broadcast across encrypted bands. Phase 1 complete. Prepare for ground incursion. Zephyr's claws dug into the console. They're not done. They're just getting closer. The last packed cruiser streaked skyward, a wounded predator retreating, but its belly split open before it cleared the clouds. Dropships poured out like a swarm of black knives. Dozens, then hundreds, streaking downward on thrusters that screamed across the night. They're not retreating, Rian muttered. They're seeding the ground. Zephyr's tail lashed, her voice carrying across the thread. Then the city becomes the battlefield. The first wave slammed into the southern districts. Streets erupted in fire and dust as armored troopers surged out, tall, insectal silhouettes in obsidian plating, their visors glowing with the Aurelian Pact's sigil. Rian and Zephyr landed their battered interceptor on a high plaza already crawling with conclave guards trying to rally. Panic ran louder than orders. Civilians screamed through the avenues, dragging children, clutching what little they could carry. Hold the bridges! A guard captain shouted, voice cracking. Don't let them! He never finished. A pack trooper's plasma lance carved him down where he stood. Zephyr moved before thought. Her whip sang through the air, wrapping the weapon and ripping it from the trooper's claws. She closed the distance in 3 strides, driving her blade between the armor seams with brutal precision. The body collapsed, sparks dancing. Rian covered her flank, his pistol barking in controlled bursts. 2 more troopers fell, their visors shattering under high-velocity rounds. Through the thread he felt her fury, her precision, her refusal to yield even an inch of her city. But for every soldier they cut down, 3 more poured from the dropships. The crowd threatened to collapse under sheer numbers. We can't hold them head-on, Rian said through gritted teeth. They'll drown us in bodies. Zephyr parried a strike that would have gutted her, sparks biting her fur. Then we bleed them sideways. Funnel them. The thread snapped the plan between them, old city tunnels beneath the plazas, choke points, kill zones. Not a defense, but a drag-out brawl where the pack's numbers meant less. Rally! Zephyr shouted, her voice carrying raw command. With me! Down the bridge! The guards hesitated only a heartbeat before following her, pulling civilians in tow. Rian covered the retreat with precise fire, his augments feeding him angles and timing. 1 bullet, 2 dead. Another clip, another 5 seconds bought. They fell back into the tunnel mouths, stones swallowing them in shadow. Zephyr triggered the collapses behind them, sealing the upper bridge in rubble. The pack soldiers slammed into it, their advance slowed. In the darkness, the conclave guards looked to her, not to the elders. "Orders, Commander?" one asked, voice shaking. Zephyr straightened, her blade dripping sparks, her eyes like violet fire. "We turn the tunnels into their grave," she said. Through the thread, Rian added silently, "and we make sure the pack learns this planet doesn't kneel." The pack's boots echoed closer in the tunnels. The real war had just begun. The tunnels burned red with plasma fire. Every corner, every choke point became a furnace where Vasari claws met pack steel. Zephyr fought like a living storm, her whip cracking arcs that split armor seams, her blade drinking sparks. Rian stayed at her back, every round measured, every strike calculated, his augments pushed beyond safety. The thread bound them tighter than breath, her rage feeding his precision, his steadiness tempering her fury. The pact pressed harder. For every body that fell, another filled the space. Their chance of conquest rattled the stone. But slowly, surely, the choke points turned into tombs. The tunnels became graveyards lit by dying sparks. Then came the roar, the last dropship forcing itself into the plaza above, unloading its heaviest cadre, exosuits, hulking frames twice the size of a Vasari warrior. They dropped into the tunnels, shaking stone with every step. One charged. Rian met it head on, ducking under its hammer fist and driving a plasma charge into the armor joint. The explosion tore his shoulder raw, but through the thread Zephyr steadied him, her own body flinching at the pain he carried. She leapt onto another exo, whip wrapping its throat like a leash, yanking it down as her blade found the seam under its jaw. When the dust cleared, the last pack soldier lay broken against stone. The tunnels were quiet, save for the ragged breathing of survivors. Above, the people were already rising. The leaked files, the shattered packed fleet, the mercenaries exposed. The city no longer saw division, only resolve. Crowds filled the plazas again, not with fear, but with voices that shook the ridges. No pact. No chains. Thread eternal. The conclave had no choice. Varella's allies slunk into shadow, the rest bent to survival. Darren and Isla declared it plainly, the thread was no aberration, it was the future. That night, Rian and Zephyr stood again on their balcony, the city below lit not by fires of ruin but by lanterns of defiance. The thread hummed steady between them, not just duty, not just survival, but something fiercer, deeper. "You bled for my world," Zephyr whispered, her forehead resting against his. "And now you carry it." Rian smiled faintly, scars catching the lantern glow. "Not just your world. Ours." For the first time in cycles, the horizon was quiet. But both knew storms would come again. The difference now was simple: whatever came, they would meet it bound together.